Thank you. All right, so welcome all. Very warm welcome to all of you. This is the fourth Utopia Science Diplomacy Seminar. For those of you that are new and are not familiar with Utopia, Utopia is one of now 50 European university alliances. And Utopia consists of 10 partners across Europe. I'm based in Brussels at the Free University of Brussels, the VUB, because there's the Dutch and the French-speaking ones. And there's also the University of Gothenburg in Sweden, the University of Warwick, CY Serge Paris Université in France, and the Universidade Nova Lisboa, and Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, Ca' Foscari in Venice, the Technical University of Dresden, the University of Ljubljana, and the Babeș-Bolyai University in Cluj-Napoca. And what sets Utopia apart from other European university alliances, I think there's many aspects of it, but one aspect is we have a work package dedicated to science diplomacy. And the main aim of the work package is to, well, one of the aspects of it is to develop a series of seminars or webinars like this to raise awareness on certain topics within the science diplomacy world. So, and one aspect of I think science diplomacy is science in diplomacy, the evidence-based policy formulation process. Because right now we're at a crossroads of well, if you consider climate change and pandemics and the challenges facing sustainable development and growing populist movements which don't necessarily have the most loyal relationship with scientific evidence. I think the need to infuse policymaking and diplomatic processes with scientific evidence is more pressing than ever. And that is, I think, the aim of this the seminar, to kind of unravel the complexities of the scientific infused policymaking process. So it is my great pleasure to have to lead this seminar my colleague Diana Shendrikova, professor from Politecnico di Milano, from the Department of Energy. I know Diana through the EU Science Diplomacy Alliance, where both our institutions are members of, and the EU Science Diplomacy Alliance is building on the legacy of 3 Horizon 2020 projects that dealt with science diplomacy. Yeah, I would say we're quite the good community focusing on science diplomacy in Europe. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Diana. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eric, for this invitation. Thank you very much, Utopia, for this opportunity. And thank you all for joining. Really excited to see some of the familiar faces and many new faces, and to have this very high level, very international, multidisciplinary audience. Really excited about it. So, as Eric told already, I'm an assistant professor at Politecnico di Milano, Department of Energy, and also scientific advisor at UNESCO Chair in Energy for Sustainable Development here at Politecnico di Milano. And today we will talk about science in diplomacy. I myself not an engineer, but working in a technical university. I have my background in history of international relations and political science. And actually, the science in diplomacy, as we see it at Politecnico di Milano, is something where universities and also technical universities can have their say in policy-making process, can actually contribute, because science in diplomacy is where the scientists can support the policies and the foreign policy as well, with their knowledge, with their inputs, and so on. But as we will see, the policy-making process is a very complicated process, and many of you are practitioners, policymakers, and you know better than me that it is a very complicated process. And actually, maybe I really like this this representation, yeah, the representation of policy making process in a nutshell. Yeah, two things you don't want to see being made. They say that it was Otto von Bismarck comment. We cannot say it for sure, but two things you don't want to see being made are law and sausages. So we can see how many different inputs, how many different ingredients are there in the policy-making process: experience, evidence, traditions, judgment, expertise, habits, resources, values. They all somehow mix and mingle, but also sometimes contradict each other, and they enter in some kind of contrast and contradiction in the process. And all these things needs to be or weighted, need to be considered, needs to be put as priorities. And sometimes I say to my students that at the end of this lecture, maybe we will have more sympathy for the policymakers, because they're doing quite a hard and complicated job. We get used to criticize the policy makers. They often actually deserve that, but we also need to understand the complexity, the ambiguity of policymaking process. What we'll see today during the lecture are these main points. So policymaking in a nutshell, we'll just saw it briefly, and the origins of expert judgment and scientific advice, evidence-based policymaking. What is it? The terms, background, how it's been adopted and first used in public policymaking. Policymaking cycle. Yeah, policymaking cycle is one of policy process theories, and most used, most well spread, very also largely discussed and debated, but still the most relevant windows of opportunities and policy impact, and how to evaluate a policy, whether it's successful one, whether it's not successful one. Okay, so let's get it started. Well, I also would like you to, we are quite many, I would also like you to maybe participate, to ask questions. Please, if you have questions during the lecture, just raise your hand. If I don't see it, maybe Eric will see it and stop me, and I will be happy to answer your questions. And also, like for example, during this slide, I presented this slide. I wanted to break the ice, at least to try to break the ice, and ask you what are the common features of these three institutions, let's say. Oracles in the ancient Greece, shamans, this particularly is the Siberian shaman, and scientific advisors of IPCC. I really hope if we have the scientific advisors of IPCC that they will appreciate the humor and not get offended, just for a matter of let's say, discussion. So what is the yeah, I see some answers in the chat. Let me see. Let me see what are common features between these people. A leader figure, okay. Okay, their announcements affect a lot of people. Very good, yes. Trust. Yeah, I imagine people's trust, yeah? People's trust in their judgment. That's what you mean. Any other idea? They are all believed to have expertise and knowledge in certain areas. Wow, yeah, that's extremely accurate. Maybe you've seen my presentation before. No. No, future emphasized based on expertise and skills. Yeah, you are all really flow epistemic authority into policy. What they say will rule. Exactly, yes, you are all very close and very accurate in your judgment. Yes, they have long been individuals and groups, and these are the examples of individuals and groups. Not all of them, just 3 examples. Yeah, we can name also others, also ecclesiastic authority, yeah, religious authorities, and so on. But and many others. They have the specialized knowledge, and they've been asked to provide judgment on issues that ordinary citizens and political and religious leaders felt unable to judge for themselves. Okay, so these are, as you all very correctly noted, and I really thank you for this active participation. They have this specialized knowledge, okay, that they're considered to have this authoritative specialized knowledge that others do not have. Okay, and they are asked for this knowledge in order to solve the problems, in order to take decisions, yeah, by the political leaders, or by the community, or by the citizens. Yeah, very good. So let's make a jump to the 19th century. Why are we talking about 19th century when we are talking about the origin of expert judgment and scientific advice? Because it was a very important, it was a very important time, this the turning point. It witnessed a dramatic increase in activities that we now call scientific, that we consider scientific, and also increased visibility and social capital of men of knowledge, yeah, men of science that started to identify themselves by their disciplines. Geologists, biologists, chemists, that's only happened in the 19th century. And these men of science were, of course, also men is important and science is important. They were basically all men. They would become collectively, they would become known collectively as scientists, the community of scientists. Yeah. So the category of scientists, men of science, solidified in the late 19th and the beginning of 20th century, and their authority grows. Okay, they are also publicly recognized as scientists. There were also numerous commissions in the 19th and 20th century in Europe and the United States that were called on different occasions in order to provide scientific advice to the governments, to political leaders. Yeah, typically the impetus was failure. Problems with steam engines, boats, railroads, and especially collapsing bridges was the thing. So they were called to provide scientific advice. For example, we can also give the first example of a state grant to research. That was in the in the United States in 1830. There was this problem of exploding boilers with the persistent deadly, and it was persistent deadly problem in the steamboat industry. And the newly founded Franklin Institute in Philadelphia empowered the committee of its members to investigate the causes of high-pressure boiler explosions. And they were given money from the government to do this. So it was like the first government scientific grant. And well, basically for 6 years they were exploding boilers outside the city, and they then prepared a report on that, and they provided it to the government. Sometime passed some 6 years, something like that, and the findings from this report were actually applied to solve the social problems. So we can see the first example of evidence-based policy making, not the first, but more, let's say, modernized example of modern example of evidence-based policy making. So in this way, the professional expertise helped to solve social problems, and in its turn, these resolutions help to define what constitutes pertinent expertise. So pertinent expertise, pertinent science, is the science that solves social problem, okay, that is applied and useful. And of course, let's say the particular growth and blossom of scientific advice also went together side by side with the birth of the nation states after the French Revolution and industrialization. Okay, so there was this competition between states. Yeah, since we have the nation states, they do compete, and also there are more policymakers, let's say, and independent, more or less independent governments that need to decide for them for their governments. So there is more and more demand for scientific advice, competition between states, and an increasing need for scientific advice. Well, so let's now try and come to our recent history and the evidence-based policy making, how we see it today, how we apply it today. Well, the evidence-based policy making itself, in its modern, let's say, in the recent history, in its modern form and shape, was first applied in the medical sector, in medicine, and from medicine it actually comes and extends to other spheres of knowledge, to other spheres of science. And for the first time in the governmental program, the evidence-based policy making approach was mentioned during the rule of Tony Blair, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, from 1997 to 2007. So in his modernizing government white paper, for the first time we see the official mentioning of evidence-based policy making and its role, its important role for decision making. Policy decisions should be based on sound evidence. The raw ingredient of evidence is information. Good quality policymaking depends on high quality information derived from a variety of sources: expert knowledge, existing domestic and international research, existing statistics, stakeholder consultation, evaluation of previous policies. Yeah, we can see also how evidence is different, is various. Yeah, how it's not only expert knowledge, how the way maybe scientists would like to see it, but there are different ingredients to it. But the evidence is becomes very crucial and plays the crucial role. Yeah, that was a particular period of history. Many of you maybe remember it. It was after the end of the Cold War. There were a lot of hopes and also goodwill towards shifting from ideologically driven politics to rational decision making. And for the rational decision making, the evidence is considered very important. So the policy decisions should be better from that moment on, let's say. The policy decision should be better informed by available evidence and should include rational analysis. That's the idea of evidence-based policy making, of rational decision making. Academic researchers are now increasingly tasked with demonstrating the relevance and significance of their research, with the quality of work measured in terms of the extent to which it has an impact on policy. Okay, and also evidence-based policy making is a tool for connecting academia and government. It can be a win-win situation. Policymakers value the evidence produced by academics for its insights and potential recommendations. And while the applied nature of the enterprise also gives researchers access to government institutions and additional sources of funding. Yeah, whatever we can say, the funding is very important in research. And conducting the research that is supposed to be important for the policy making process can actually grant access to extra funding. So, well, if we talk about the policy making process itself, yeah, what is policy making? We saw that it's a rather messy process, and it's basically a public decision-making process. Yeah, for defining sets of action taken by government to control a given system, to help solve problems within it, or to obtain benefits from it. So we always have some kind of solving problems necessity. Yeah, from the demand side, from the policymaker side, they need to solve the problems. So what are the key concepts in policy decision-making process? It's legitimacy, justification, and rationality. And rationality is where the evidence-based policymaking comes into play. As we saw also during the, as we saw in the previous slide, evidence-based decision-making and rational decision-making, they really go by side. And how do we call? How can we identify the quality of good policy policy making? When do we call a policy making process a good policy making process? Good policy making. Well, there are two major ingredients to it. Well, in this shape, it looks like more like vodka martini, but it's process and evidence. Okay, if the process of the policy making, the correct process of the policy making, something that we will talk into more detail further on, and good quality evidence. If there is these different evidence, as we saw before, and as we will see also afterwards, different sources of evidence, of course, and a correct process. In this way, we can say that the policy making is a good policy making. Well, there are, now we will talk about various challenges. There are plenty of them, and of course, you as practitioners, also as scientists involved in policy making, and so that many of you have an expertise in science diplomacy. You know very well that there are different challenges to the evidence-based policy making, but there are also different challenges in democratic and non-democratic countries to evidence-based policymaking, which I would like to show you. So, in democratic countries and non-democratic countries. Well, I sometimes hear, especially when, when talking not with experts like you, but for example, with my colleagues, which I love very much, engineers, they may say that, it's so hard to take decisions in the democratic countries. It would be so much better if there is just one person to decide, or like, it would be so much faster. Like there are some countries where decisions are taken much faster and so on. But I would like to underline that there are challenges on both sides. So in democratic countries, there is the persuasion style of government. Yeah, the politicians, they need to persuade the population, at least to vote for them to begin with. They need to persuade, they need to attract somehow. Yeah, so that's a persuasion style of government. And in democratic countries, usually there is a necessity to combine scientific evidence with public values. Okay, so there are these two important things that need to be to combined and to find some kind of common ground between scientific evidence and public values. Strong dependence on the public opinion in decision-making process. Some cases, direct public participation in government consultations or commissions, public consultations, or in few or less routine cases, deliberative exercise such as citizen juries or referendums. Yeah. So the representative democracy in which people elect politicians to make decisions on their behalf is the more frequent and, let's say, also the easiest mechanism to legitimize policies by combining evidence and values. As we saw before, legitimacy is one of the very important ingredients in the policy-making process. And in the democratic government, elected politicians, they are legitimized by being elected to bring forward the policies. So what can we tell about the non-democratic countries? They have their own problems, of course, where they have the command style of government rather than the persuasion style. Solution of policy problems without the public support. So, and the difficulty in knowing whether policy is successful or not. So from the beginning to the end, you are kind of moving in the dark, trying to understand whether this policy is supported by the public, whether it's successful or not, because you don't really have, in non-democratic countries, you usually do not have the feedback, the ways to legitimize your policies and to know whether it's actually wanted, accepted, or whether it works. Well, there are some also specific cases, like, for example, the China's case, where policy and people are considered to be in harmony, as both formulators and recipients are part of the same correct process. In fact, the trust in government in China is rather high. But there are all those theories of benevolent autocrats, very fallacious theories in my mind also, because all the autocrats that once were called benevolent then became much less benevolent with the time. That's somehow something that is inevitable, that with the time any autocrat becomes only more and more severe, more and more aggressive, and so on. So, but yeah, we need to consider these two differences: the legitimization of the policies, which is in democratic countries, is kind of directly it's intrinsic of the democratic process, of the election process, which is not the case in the non-democratic countries. Sometimes non-democratic countries, they still insist on the election process to create this resemblance of the legitimacy. That's why the autocratic countries, they still hold the elections in order to create this feeling of legitimacy, which is not really there. Okay. So, and of course, when we talk about this, the evidence-based policy making further on, it's more applicable. It's more applicable to the democratic process, because into the democratic countries, and I really let's say, wish all of you to have to contribute to the policy making process if you are scientists in a democratic country, because it is it's more transparent. It's a bit easier, even if it's still very complicated. It's a bit easier to understand where things are happening, and to have the access to it, because there are different mechanisms for that. Okay, so obstacles of evidence-based policymaking. Scientists and policymakers. Let's see. What are these obstacles? Because there are biases from both sides. Okay, from the side of the policymakers, from the side of the scientists. The first bias and the first obstacle of evidence-based policymaking are different objectives of the policymakers and of the scientists. Policymakers are looking for certainty and clear solutions, okay? While scientists focus on the evidence. So unless the scientist is not sure about the evidence, about the results, they continue until they are satisfied with their research outcomes. But policymakers, they need certainty, and also many scientists, they have pros and cons, and it's a part of normal scientific process. Yeah, if it's a rigorous scientific process, you put everything together. Like there are the pros and cons on the of a research method or a research approach, and there are these opinions and those opinions. So policymakers, they are looking for certainty and clear solutions. That's why we don't have time to talk about it today, but that's why the consensus is the most, let's say, generally adopted method to talk science to policymakers. Yeah, well, if we have consensus on a certain issue, it's easier that the policymaker actually will adopt this policy solution. Okay, so different timeframes. Policymakers usually think in weeks, if not days. Yeah, it's usually it's really all the decisions, they need to be taken very urgently. Scientists, they do not have this time frame, again, until they get the results that satisfies them. They continue their research. So scientists think in months, if not years. So these are important obstacles from both sides, the biases from both sides. So continuing the topic of obstacles, we will have also some solutions afterwards, but I think it's very important to go into detail on these obstacles. So the lack of reliable and contested evidence on the effectiveness of policy solutions can be an obstacle of evidence-based policymaking. Yeah. Scientists are clear on the size and nature of the problem, but the evidence on solution is patchy. Yeah, maybe there is no consensus. Also, there are different opinions around this topic. So, in this case, policymakers may be reluctant to act or invest in expensive solutions, even if they recognize that there is a pressing problem to solve. Okay. So the second obstacle, the tendency of policymakers to ignore, reject the most effective or best evidence policy solutions. The evidence on the relative effectiveness of some solutions may be relatively clear, but this doesn't mean that they should be adopted. Policymakers weigh up not only the evidence on impact, but also the cost and the value for money, the opportunity cost. That means what other problems can be solved, maybe more pressing problems, or also publicly urgent, like the urgent from the public opinion point of view problems can be solved with the same investment elsewhere, and political feasibility. You remember the quote from the Modernizing paper on government of Tony Blair, how many different source of evidence was there. Yeah, it's not only the scientific evidence. So the evidence on solutions only covers one narrow part of a multifaceted decision. Yeah. So the tendency also of policymakers to decide what they want to do, then seek enough evidence or distort that evidence to support their decision. Yeah, no, it's not the best way to do it. Not best practice of the evidence-based policymaking, but that does happen. Even in these cases, we would need to recognize, first of all, the legitimate decision of policymakers to pay attention to different forms of evidence, and not only to the evidence that we provide, even if we scientists consider it the best possible evidence ever, and their reluctance to act on the basis of a single report or piece of evidence. Again, our evidence is just one narrow part of the entire of the world of options, possibilities of the evidence. Further, the appearance of distortion may relate more to the need of policymakers to act quickly and often in the absence of unequivocal information. In such cases, they need just enough information to get them over the line. A practice that may seem aligned to academic scientists with the time to wait for greater certainty. So they just need some information to solve their urgent problem and gain some time to wait for the greater certainty. That again somehow recalls the consensus, yeah, which was actually chosen widely by scientists as the way to talk science to policymakers, yeah, because it's easily to be adopted. Something, a decision on which there is consensus among the scientists. And finally, bounded evidence-based policymakers. So policymakers find simple ways to make decisions after weighing up a wide range of evidence, of which science forms one part. Scientists are part of a policymaking process in which evidence may reduce uncertainty, but not ambiguity. And the use of scientific evidence represents only one of many aspects of good policymaking. Well, this is the kind of slide of asking scientists to be humble in providing their evidence and in trying to demonstrate how many different evidence a policymaker has to wait before taking the decision. Well, but how can scientists engaged in evidence-based policymaking. And that actually, it would be very interesting to have a feedback from the practitioners. We have many practitioners today among our respected audience, and it would be interesting to know whether actually these suggestions relevant for the policy making process the way you know it. So, how can scientists actually engage in evidence-based policy making? So the first, it's important to, so from the let's say from the obstacles we come to solutions. It's important to understand where the action, the policy, the policy decision making is taking place. So recognize the often central role of subsystems, and also the venue, and the venue where these decisions are taken, and to find where these key venues in which people are making authoritative decisions are, because also there are the formal and informal, written and unwritten rules of policymaker in these venues inside of institutions. So it's very important to also learn the rules of the game of policymaking. And to learn the rules of every venue in which you are engaged. So knowledge of appropriate behavior is crucial to develop reputations within government, built on reliability, word of mouth, and trust. So they place the rules of the game, frame our evidence to make it attractive. So persuasion is at the heart of a policy process riddled with ambiguity. Actors have particular beliefs and incentives to act. So now when I talk about framing our evidence to make it attractive, scientists in this case, but not only, actually also other stakeholders that want to bring in their evidence. We usually teach our students to write policy briefs in order to frame the evidence in a more attractive and more accessible way for policymakers. Yeah, it's really interesting exercise also especially with our students here in Politecnico University of Milan. They sometimes have very exciting research which no one except them can understand, even their colleagues in other departments or in other research groups within the department. So let's say the exercise to frame their evidence, the important evidence, in an accessible way, and to communicate it in a way that in a policy brief, in a way that can be understood by non-experts, which usually policymakers are, because they cannot be experts of everything, is very important. Then forming coalitions with other actors in the process based on the knowledge that policymakers seek many sources of information. Yeah, the more you have, the more allies you have to support your proposal, to support your evidence, the better. To involve in the policymaking process long enough, yeah, to see its results. Policymakers' attention is often driven by changes in socioeconomic factors or routine or non-routine events. So be prepared to exploit the windows of opportunity to present your solution during heightened attention to a policy problem. We will talk about windows of opportunity in a bit. But yeah, it's important to be involved long enough, because you can see the policy from, let's say, from the beginning to the end. We will also talk about policy cycle in a bit, and you can be also involved in the process of adjustment of the policy afterwards, because it's rare that the policy is successful from the first shot. There might be necessity to adjust it further on, and also the evidence might be needed to in the process. Well, so when we talk about bringing together the supply and demand of policy relevant knowledge, there was this exercise, this joint research work between the policy process researchers and European Commission to identify these eight skills that are needed from both sides, from demand and supply, in order to bridge this gap between scientists and policymakers. So there are 8 of them: research synthesis to generate state-of-the-art knowledge on the policy problem, management of expert communities to maximize collaboration, to create this connection between the expert communities and policymakers, to create these relations is very important. That's why because when a policymaker might need, if this relation is established, when the policymaker needs an input, needs scientific advice, they know where to go. They know where to ask, whom to ask. Understanding policy making, to know when and how to present evidence. Interpersonal skills to focus on relationship and interaction. Again, that's something that I was just talking about. Engagement to include citizens and stakeholders. Effective communication of knowledge. Monitoring and evaluation to identify the impact of evidence on policy. Policy advice, to know how to present knowledge effectively and ethically. Yeah, coming back to policy briefing that what I was talking about before. Well, let's go deeper into the policy making cycle. Yeah, the policy making cycle, in order to understand where scientists can actually can be involved in the policy making cycle. It would be useful to know what are the stages, what is the classical policymaker cycle is. So this is this policy-making cycle, which is still it's considered classical and is still applied in policy policy science, political science, and policy studies. It was this policy-making cycle was proposed in the middle of the 20th century by Harold Laswell. He's an American political scientist, and he's also he actually created this policy-making cycle on the basis of his own experience, because he was a scientific advisor at the government of the United States, and was very much involved in this policymaking cycle, in the policymaking process. So he proposes these 5 stages. The first one is agenda setting. A problem or challenge that impacts the public is initially identified. Okay, solutions are put forward by interested parties both inside and outside the government. Agenda setting. So then we go towards policy formation, the development of policy options within the government. Officials narrow the range of possible policy choices by excluding unfeasible options. In this step, different interested parties attempt to have their favorite policy solution rank high among the remaining options. This step often involves a period of intense debate. Decision making. Next step, government leaders decide on a particular course of action. Ideally, it is the course that will best address the problem for the most members of the public. Okay, because our policies and public policy making, they should address and the idea is to address the most members of the public. Government policy implementation. Governments put the chosen public policy option into effect. Officials use the tools of public administration that impact the distribution of government goods and services or make changes in how to government taxes the public. The changes should reflect the sentiments and values of the affected parties. Policy implementation. And finally, the last step is policy evaluation. Interested parties, both within and outside the government, monitor the impact of the policy and determine if it's achieving the intended goals. This can lead to further changes in public policy done in light of the impact of the original policy. And it's actually a cycle, because if the further changes needed to the policy, then we go again to the first stage and so on. Well, this is the classical policy making cycle. And now I would like you to get again involved, and I would kindly ask you to participate to this book lab survey, which I prepared for you. We use this book lab at Politecnico di Milano, so it's quite safe as a website. You can just screen the QR code with your phone, and you will see it should be now on. You will see okay, great, thank you. The survey. So, on which stage of the policy making cycle, the classical policy making cycle of last fall we've just seen, on which stage of the policymaker cycle can scientific community be involved? Yeah, you can choose more than one. You can choose many options, as many options as you prefer. So, on which stage of policymaking cycle can scientific community be involved? Let's see. Okay. I'll give you 2 minutes. Don't think too much. Of course, it's anonymous as a survey. We will just see the aggregated result at the end. Yeah, don't overthink it. Okay. Let's have 1 more minute, then we'll see the result. Okay. I remind you that you can choose more than one stage. Okay, let me. Okay, let's do 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, Wow, okay, I guess that everyone who wanted to express their opinion did that. Let me just try and share it. So you can see it, right? You can see the results. Share it. Okay. So, well, I could not expect. I couldn't expect other from the experts that we have here. Yes, that's actually. Well, we see three, let's say, three leaders: agenda setting, policy formation, and policy evaluation. And I would also agree with you that these are the main ones. Of course, again, we spoke about the fact that the process of policy making is complicated, and there might be also, you might be engaged in other stages, but just a second, I will share again my presentation. Okay. 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 But okay, sorry. But usually these are the stages where the scientists are involved. Also because well, agenda setting. Anyone wants to express their ideas about how scientists can be involved, why they can be involved in agenda setting? Anyone feels like saying something about that? Yes, yes, please. I see someone, Natasha. Yes.
Okay, so for example, in evidence-based policy making, it might be important if they signal important policies that are in place or should be discussed or something like that, for example.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, and also, for example, for you're absolutely right. Thank you very much for your input. In climate policies, it was scientific community that actually contributed so much in agenda setting. About the climate policies. Yes, they can give the option, or they can raise awareness, or they can alert about some problems which they know, like, for example, in case of climate change. That was the case, but not only. Yes, Armando also wanted to add something.
Yes, I think we could add there also the expertise of science in informing the different lobbying groups for that work actually in trying to influence the agenda setting of the governments.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. Informing lobbying groups is part of this engagement in agenda setting process. Thank you. Yeah, we also have Paula that wrote, maybe involving them in agenda setting ensure that decision makers have access to accurate and up-to-date information when establishing priorities. Absolutely. Thank you, Paula. Also, it's very relevant. Well, let's move to policy formation. Anyone who choose policy formation wants to add their considerations. We have John. Scientists can challenge prevailing assumptions underpinning policy. Okay. Okay. The role of critical policy analysis is important here. Yeah, absolutely. Here. Something about policy formation. Someone else who want to add in policy formation. Anthony, scientists can provide data, models, analysis to inform the development of the different policy options and strategies. Absolutely, yes. Data, models, analysis. Yeah, to form the policy. Yeah, well, actually, thank you for saying for mentioning models, because I'm in the research group of energy modeling. So thank you for that. Yes, absolutely, very correct. Anyone wants to add something, or let's see about policy evaluation. Maybe someone wants to say something about policy evaluation. How can scientists engage in policy evaluation? We kind of partly spoke about it before, but maybe you have something to add. Yeah, well, you remember what I said before. Yeah, to be engaged in the in the policymaking process long enough to see the outcomes, and to be able to intervene with the additional evidence once it's needed, to maybe to correct the policy. But also what Anthony said, yes, yeah. Perhaps identify relevant metrics to evaluate the policies and identify any side effects of the policies. Exactly, that's very important, Anthony. Yes, metrics, the models, or also the various metrics, indicators, how this policy can be effectively evaluated. That's also something scientists can provide. Yeah, but now just 2 words of why did we decide did scientific community of policy researchers decided to exclude decision making and policy implementation from the stages where scientists can be directly involved? Well, first of all, let's leave some work to do to policymakers. So decision making is actually the direct work and direct duty of policymakers. So they value all the evidence which scientists provided. They used the models and whatever that are there. They weighted it all, but the decision making is made by policymakers. Yeah. And then also the policy implementations. Well, there is the entire mechanism of how to implement these policies, which is within the different government bodies. That's also the direct responsibility of the policymakers and of the government to implement the decisions. Yes. Okay. Again, if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer. But we have breaking news here. Now we studied the policy cycle. It's really nice, and it's like cycle and 5 stages, all clear cut, and also such a nice representation. So the breaking news is that policy making cycle is never applied in a real life policy making process. Yeah. So why do we still? Study classical policy making cycle if it's not really applied in its classical shape in the policy making, in the real life policy making. Anyone wants to share the ideas? Why do we still study classical policy making cycle? Any idea on that? Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I don't know if somebody else wanted to go. Well, I suppose why do we still study anything from the classics? I mean, it's a good model and something to be reminded of a systemic sort of process, and even if it doesn't really fold out into reality, it's still, I think, a concise, succinct model that can kind of help guide thinking and planning, and also looking back at policy making, sort of a concise model to kind of compare it to.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yes, thank you very much, Eric. Yes, it's a kind of it's a model not to to try by all means to apply in real life, but to compare to compare the real life policy making to the classical model. And many researchers and practitioners, they agree that, I don't know, maybe again, some of you want to share their experience. Many researchers and practitioners, they agree that even though this classical policymaking cycle is rarely or never applied in its in this sequence of the stages, many of these stages are still present. They may be messier, they may be less definite, but they're still present and they're still relevant in the policy-making cycle. And it would be a good practice to somehow, when you take a policy decision, when you conduct your policy-making process, to see whether you actually, even not in the best sequence, in the correct sequence, if these stages you are applied in your process, to make sure that your policy making is a good quality policy making. Yeah. So, and yeah, I was trying for many months to find out what can I compare, this policy making cycle to. Maybe you have again better ideas. If you do, please share. But I thought about this the healthy diet, yeah, which we all kind of know and keep in mind that we need to eat a lot of vegetables, so there should be some protein, there's some carbs. We kind of know how it looks. We really kind of don't have a chance to always apply it, but many people try to somehow, at least, they keep it in mind when they eat pizza for the entire week. They say, well, maybe now we need to eat a little bit of more vegetables. I don't know if it's the best comparison, but that's something that came up to my mind, is this real life toward something ideal, which is never there, but still we kind of compare what we do towards this ideal model. Yes, well, since we agreed that policymaking cycle, the classical policymaking cycle, and also researchers agreed it's not does not represent real life policymaking process, there have been so many attempts to somehow represent the real policymaking process. It's also a matter of approach, matter of taste. Maybe the best representation does not exist, but I just wanted to give you an idea of other representations that are there. These attempts to bring this closer to real life. For example, the policy streams framework, the 5-stream framework of policy process. So basically, the policy agenda gains attention and alternative solutions are selected when elements of the 3 streams come together. There are 3 streams of policy solution, problem, and policies. And then we can see critical junctures, yeah, when all these 3 streams, they come together and be passed to the next stage of the policy making. Yeah, so the streams are decision-making powers that are broadly distributed among different stakeholders. They are organized according to 3 main concepts. Yeah, as I said, problem, policies, and politics. And each of these 3 streams contains the various individuals, groups, agencies, institutions, policy-making process. Yeah, we see this attempt to somehow to include this complexity, complexity of policy-making in these representations. So, studying policy-making through the lens of several semi-independent streams or events and actors interacting with each other to define the control the policy agenda stresses its constant complexity. Yeah, we can we also can see it from the representation that's a bit that's all entangled and stuff. So it's occasional chaos and sometimes highly contingent nature faced sometimes lost in the cycle approach. Yeah, in the cycle we cannot see this complexity, this chaos, which actually is there in the policymaking cycle. So okay, and when these streams meet, there is some progress in the policy making. Yeah, these critical junctions, they go to the next level. Yeah, again, it's a matter also of also this policy cycle is criticized and the research is ongoing, and there are some other policy cycles that are elaborated by the researchers, but the idea is that rather than we engaging in the process of contrasting these frameworks with each other and conducting empirical analysis intended to prove or disapprove their superiority or to choose the best or the worst, the ambition for researchers might be to blend and integrate them to deepen our insight into the various stages of the policy process, serving thereby to supplement rather than replace the cycle model. Yeah, so different approaches, they can supplement they can complement, yeah, the supplement the policy cycle that we saw before, and to give a better idea of its complexity, of the different peculiarities. Yeah, so it's a kind of intelligent policymaking. The term proposed by Sanderson in 2009, intelligent policymaking, built on awareness of your position in a complex system over which you have no control, seems like a more useful focus of training than a simple set of functions built on a too simplistic understanding of policy processes. Okay, so there are some ways of how to improve the opportunity for evidence to have an impact, yeah, on the policies, and these are two of them. I will introduce you today. This window of opportunities. And the other one is advocacy coalitions. We will talk after. So window of opportunities is something, some phenomena that can improve the opportunity of evidence to have an impact. And it's important for the researcher, for the scientist to see this window of opportunities. Well, it's also important for the policymaker, but since this is a kind of presentation that is from behalf of scientists, let's say, but it is also important for policy for scientists. So, what is a window of opportunity? The name actually says a lot, but it was proposed by John Kingdom, he talks in his theory of how and why topics rise to be on the national policy agenda, because of course there are many topics here, many topics, and not all of them rise to the agenda. Not all of them become arrive in the center of policymakers' attention. So people, and particularly policy leaders, are bombarded with information about various problems that need policy solutions. Yeah. However, only few issues rise to the level of attention. So when policy ideas, public opinion, and political leadership are joined together, when all the stars meet, a problem is recognized, the solution is available, and the political climate happens to be right all at the same moment. This is the window of opportunity. Yeah. For the substantial policy change. For instance, a trigger event can change public understanding of a policy issue or a policymaker's understanding of the problem, leading to a change in the political stream that is favorable to policy change. So a trigger event, is important also sometimes in the window of opportunity that we will see the example after all. Well, for example, windows of opportunity after events like crashes or terrorist attacks enabled agencies to adopt more stringent aviation safety, for example, and security standards. Well, for example, you can maybe remember after 9/11, there were no questions of the safety, the aviation safety was restricted. We still many of those policies adopted actually worldwide, like the liquids and stuff like that, and that was a window of opportunity for these aviation safety, and that was actually a trigger event that created a window of opportunity for these policies to be put in place. So, well, since I work in the Department of Energy, we have the example on energy. Yeah. So the case study of Repower EU. So the EU was the first to officialize, as we all know, its climate pledges, setting ambitious climate goals to decarbonize completely by 2050. And after the beginning of the war in Ukraine, the climate concerns, they were complemented by the energy security issues and the urgency to reduce Union's energy dependency from Russia. Yeah, while the EU was faced with the new uncertainties related to the energy security dilemma, which is guaranteeing uninterrupted availability of energy resources at an affordable price. And this security dilemma to guarantee energy supply actually was risking to undermine climate efforts that were declared a little earlier. So to achieve climate pledges and to address the new challenges, the Repower EU plan was put forward by the European Commission. So Repower EU stands basically on 3 pillars. It's saving energy by 15% by all members, by lowering heat and temperature in the premises, and so on. I think that many of you have felt and actually actively participated in this particular part of Repower EU, lowering the heating temperature, diversifying partners for the energy supply, so in order to substitute Russian gas, and rollout of renewables, speeding up renewable deployment 45% by 2030. So, talking about trigger events, what happened that allowed the Repower EU to be put in place, to be adopted, because these are, as you saw the numbers, these are quite stringent measures. These are quite, in other times it would be much debated and so on, but something happened, and this window of opportunity to introduce this law appeared. So, 2 trigger events. The COVID-19, this trigger event underlined the necessity of environment protection and made population more sensible towards climate change. For example, International Monetary Fund, for example, study finds that the experience of the pandemic has increased concern for climate change and also increased public support for a green recovery in both advanced and emerging economies. And also war in Ukraine. This trigger event underlined the necessity to diversify energy supplies and to speed up energy transition to renewable energy to decrease dependency on fossil fuel suppliers. So the window of opportunity triggered by the above events allow for some policy options to be brought forward due to public support, favorable political climate, and general consensus on urgency of intervention. All this leading to a change in the political stream, as we saw before. Okay. how do you measure policy influence to determine impact? Okay. Okay. Yeah, how to measure impact is really an important thing, an important topic to talk about, and we will just talk about it in a minute. So another way of improving the opportunity for evidence to have an impact, I think it's also something that it connects well to what Armando said before, yeah, to inform lobbying group and so on. So it's advocacy coalition framework, yeah. So we can see this the policy environment in the advocacy coalition framework, policymakers is influenced both by relatively stable system parameters and dynamic system parameters. So the stable aspects include basic attributes of the problem area, basic distribution of natural resources in the society, fundamental cultural values and social structures. Dynamic features include changes in socioeconomic conditions, technology, in public opinion, changes in systemic governing coalitions and lobby groups. So the policy change is it's also when something that I was talking about before, that we need to find, let's say, like-minded stakeholders in order to bring forward our evidence to make it more, or our policy options to make it more, let's say, possible for the election. Policy change is unlikely if there are advocacy coalitions from different political factions that have no shared interest with each other and have few shared interests with policymakers. But it's possible for polarized groups that are marginalized and on the surface look like they are divided to find common ground on a public or social policy issue of common concern and form alliances and the potential advocacy coalition. Yeah, that's also, well, sometimes we can see this, that the major fractions, they cannot agree on anything, and the smaller fractions, they actually can bring forward that look initially marginalized, they can bring forward their agenda. Yeah, well, if someone is familiar with the Italian policy, that can be rather evident how they initially marginalized group that are considered to be marginalized, they can actually uniting together with other groups actually become after a while mainstream, and also they can bring forward the agenda. But I'm sure that also in other countries that's something that is rather well spread. Well, how to evaluate the policy? It's very complicated, and yeah, that's the how to evaluate policy, how to measure its impact, and it's also the idea, answering to your question, the idea is that going back to the beginning, is to evaluate the process, if the correct process was applied. Here, the policy cycles can actually be very much useful, and the evidence, if the quality evidence was used. Yeah, two ingredients of good policy making. But there are quite different, you can see from this picture also, different indicators by which we can judge the policy, evaluate the policy, right? Methodology, approach, who is organizer, the users, the designs and outcomes, and also moment, if we evaluate policy ex ante, ex post. all this we can see. We can also choose and mix and match. Unfortunately, I cannot. There is no silver bullet for this. There is no one decision fits all. That's really depends on the policy. It depends on the policymakers. It depends on the tools at their disposal. But yeah, there are all different typologies and approaches to public policy evaluation. Yeah, well, how do we know if a policy is successful? Again, these are not going to be. Oh, why not? Okay, yeah, these are not going to be an exhaustive list. It's very simplified, let's say, but the policy is a complete success to the extent that it demonstrably creates widely valued social outcomes. Its design, decision-making, and delivery process that enhance both its problem-solving capacity and its political legitimacy, and sustains this performance for a considerable period of time, even in the face of changing circumstances. Well, just to give you an example of one of the typologies of policy evaluation was ex ante and ex post. Yeah, it's also the timing is very important when you evaluate the policy. There is the example of this it's opera house in Australia. It's very symbolic. Let's say symbolic building in Australia, but actually when it was constructed, during the construction, it was considered a complete failure. The policy was a complete failure because the spending was actually like 10 times more than it was envisaged in the beginning. In the middle of the construction, the main architect, he left with the scandal, the project, and it all seemed to be, and the population criticized a lot. But when time passed, after 10 years, after the construction, all those scandals, and all those spendings, they somehow got forgotten, and it became evaluated in a quite different way, both by policymakers and by public. It became its symbolic value became most important, became the symbol of Australia, and this project and this policy became evaluated positively. So also this is something that happens. Well, I'm done with my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions, maybe we still have some minutes. I will be happy to respond. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. That was very, very good presentation. I really enjoyed that. It's a very important aspect, especially in this day and age where I think evidence-based policymaking is more vital than ever. Of course, this meeting is scheduled until 11:30, but I mean, if there's no objections, we could always make it a little bit longer. I just had one question. When you were talking about sort of the emergence of sort of the rational decision making using Tony Blair, his coming to power in 1997 as an example. But then if you fast forward to 2016 during the Brexit campaign, I remember there was this other British government minister, this time in the Conservative Party, Michael Gove, and he was saying how he thinks the public have had enough of experts' opinions. So between 1997 and 2016, what do you think happens? And we're talking about how to restore the faith of evidence-based policymaking, but how does it erode? What are the conditions that kind of lead to it being the skepticism surrounding it?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's really a question that one can talk about for hours what changed. Like so many things changed between 1997 and 2016, and I think it's after 2016 it only became worse. Actually, the also with the COVID contributing a lot and undermining somehow, even though it's really strange. Like it should from one point of view, COVID was a momentum for the scientific advice and for the evidence-based policy making, and it was quite a success for a scientific community. From the other, let's say the suspicion or towards the scientific community and towards scientists grew, and many people somehow the trust in science actually decreased in many ways. So we can actually see how our societies are becoming more and more polarized. That's, I think, something that is happening and that is changing since 1997, when, as I said, it was a very encouraging time, and it was people were very much enthusiastic, the Fukuyama end of history. We will all live in a democratic and liberal world, and everyone is already 100% convinced that that's the best possible way to live. And then everything changed. The history is back. Rephrasing Fukuyama, and we have the same problems. Somehow it's even though we say that history never repeats itself, it's a different situation and different actors and so on. But we still somehow we can see this the end of this enthusiasm and this positive vision of global politics. And I also think that the change from 2016 to now is that when you said that it was a conservative party leader, I think that now from both parties would agree with something that's I don't know, that's no, it's I think that more and more people would somehow even not only would somehow agree with statement like that that we have enough of the experts. So, but I think that there is this polarization of the society. And these parts that support science and those that somehow are skeptical about science, they have less things in common, less common ground. They're always more hostile between them, and it's really I think it's really a challenge for the evidence-based policymaking, because the dialogue, the communication is really important in this case. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, perfect. It was a very, very good spanning answer, and and I think also just the gulf in sort of what the scientific evidence is saying and the extent to which people absorb it. It's quite a vast sort of and growing sort of divide. And probably, I guess, one of the aspects to it is science communication, trying to convey rather complex scientific evidence into ways that people understand it. And that's, I think, becoming harder and harder. And well, does anybody else like to ask any questions? There's lots to digest from this.
I think that I was wondering if you have any book recommendation for scientists interested to learn more about the principled practice of evidence-based policymaking. Yeah, I will share with Eric some literature, and if you maybe he can share with everyone
Yes.
else.
Yeah, exactly. And we're working on a page for the Utopia website to kind of be a source of different science diplomacy materials, you know, to kind of broaden the scope. So yeah, if you can send me some names of books, Diana, we can add those to the website, and then yeah, have a bit of a science diplomacy library.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but I don't know if we have a policymaker, a practitioner here, because it's maybe someone can give their feedback on whether they kind of find themselves in the in what I said. Because again, I think it's very important to have this feedback, because you know, policymakers, they talk among themselves, and then scientists, they talk among themselves and they make their considerations. And I think that the important thing is to find these connections, and also these spaces like this seminar where we have both policymakers and scientists. And that's why I really would like to have maybe feedback from some practitioner, some policymaker, or maybe regarding some challenges that you face in using evidence, scientific evidence in your work.
Any practitioners in the audience? I have to say we had a very big audience in the beginning. I think perhaps other, you know, people have their jobs to do, so maybe some of them have left.
Sure.
Just on a side note, we had 100 registrations for this, which is very that speaks to great lengths to how important of an issue this is. And we had about 50 people tuning in at the height of it, and perhaps some of those were practitioners, but they've had to go and practition now.
to conduct the good policy making.
Yes, exactly. That's where they've gone.
That's good. Thank you so much. Yes.
Well, yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was brilliant.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, and it's my honor to have you, and to be able to have the opportunity to talk to you, and to somehow in this presentation I didn't put my email address, but maybe I can put it. Can I put it in the chat? So if anyone wants have any questions or suggestions or whatever, I would be really happy to. Okay, so it's name, surname, polymib.it. Thank you.
Well, yeah, thank you very much, Diana, and we'll be in touch. And thank you to the rest of you very much for attending another, I think, fruitful Utopia Science Diplomacy seminar. So on that note, have a very nice rest of your day, and we'll be in touch soon. Okay?
All right. Bye. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.